won't let me drive anymore. That's the window blowout incident. You can drop the hydraulics and do his life inside there. Hopefully you've had all your shots. But I thought I'd begin with this slide because it shows my passion for meteorology. It also shows what my hairline looks like when there's a 100-mile-per-hour wind blowing at it. And that was back in 2008, before we had the Dominator. It was a Chevy Tahoe back then, so it's still the same vehicle. And even though it looks a lot different, it's still insured as a Tahoe, just a little bit modified. But back then, we deployed an instrument pack in the path of tornadoes that measured wind speed and direction, and also recorded HD video inside the tornadoes. And now we've added armor to the vehicle, and now we're just like a mobile version of that probe. Because when you drop those in the path of the tornado, you have to stand out, line it up, and if the tornado is moving side to side, it's likely going to miss you. It's moving across your field of view. But if it's not moving side to side and getting bigger, that means it's coming at you. But it's really difficult to line them up because they'll change direction pretty quickly, especially the really small tornadoes. And back then, we didn't see many tornadoes the whole season, but finally had one that we can deploy on May 29, 2008. And we have one follow vehicle that follows behind. There's a production vehicle. It's just a rental Tahoe. And back then, our plan was to drop that instrument pack in the path of the tornado and then meet them to the north of it, let the tornado pass, and go back and retrieve the instrument probe. And on that day, Chris and I got out of the car, lifted it out of the back of the vehicle, weighs about 300 pounds, but it feels like a feather when you have the adrenaline going and the tornado's coming. And we underestimated its forward speed. Suddenly there are hay bales flying through the air, and it's just about to hit us. So we didn't have time to go to the north, so we put the car in reverse, backed up, and I looked down the horizon and saw brake lights right in the path of the tornado. It was the Tahoe vehicle, the production vehicle. And the executive producer was bounced from team to team, so she happened to be in that vehicle. She never followed us again after that. But we used our microphone to communicate with them, because everything I say, they can hear on the radio. They turn up their speaker. They probably have it down during most of the time, because my voice would get a little annoying, as I'm sure all you know. But we used that to communicate when we're pulling around tornadoes. So I looked up and said, back up car 2. I just panicked. I started yelling really loud, and it looked like I was yelling at Joel, but I was really yelling at the follow vehicle, and that was when I was making that face right there. Step forward there. So this is a picture from the 2010 season. This is a tornado in north central South Dakota, and I think this tornado was F5. I've only seen one F5 in my career. This was the May 3rd, 1999 tornado. I was just a freshman at OU then. And we didn't know what we were doing, and I can tell you from first-hand experience that if you want to get into storm chasing, it's important to go to Skyward training courses and learn the basics of storm structure first, because we just piled in a soft-top geotractor, and next thing we know, we're in the path of an F5, then underneath an overpass, and this was before the research came out that it's more dangerous to take shelter under that, so it accelerates the flow, and I ended up being covered in mud, and easily could have died and never would have seen more tornadoes. So I really wish I would have gone with someone that knew what they were doing, or taken one of those Skyward courses first, because not only would I have learned faster, but it would have been a lot less dangerous. But this tornado right here, thankfully didn't hit anything, because it probably would have gotten an F5 rating and caused extensive damage. But it was a perfect tornado for research, because in the middle of nowhere, didn't hit anything, and didn't have huge chunks of debris flying around, except for a big combine that we saw ejected from the tornado. And at that point, we were about 50 yards outside of it, decided to stop and wait for a better tornado. Not to mention our radar was getting repaired. We didn't have our air scan system. So this one, we couldn't research anyway. We almost drove into it, but decided it was a little bit too strong. And for those that haven't seen Discovery Channel storm chasers, there are 3 teams. There's the TIV, which is another tornado vehicle. Those are the bad guys. That's driven by Sean Shaky. And his vehicle, I think, can handle a lot stronger winds. I'd probably feel safer in the TIV inside an F4 or F5 tornado, but getting to the tornado is much more of a problem for those guys. Then there's us. That picture right there is from 2009, and that's the same Dominator. It's just that we did some improvements that I'll talk about later. And the window blowout motivated a lot of those. Back then, it looked like a red shoe. Also, there's the Swiss team, and that's Tim Samara. He's a great guy. He's someone I've looked up to my whole entire storm chasing career. And if there is a real-life version of Bill Paxton, Tim Samara is definitely it. He'd be the guy that would be out from the gas station, a pair of Wranglers, throwing dirt in the air to try to find the tornadoes. Great scientist too, and he has the world record pressure fall measurement inside a tornado, and it was F4 in Manchester, South Dakota, and we were on that tornado as well. I'll show you video from that day. But first, I'll show you a quick highlight clip of the 2009 season, and this is the first year that we had the Dominator going. And I'll show you our very first near intercept. We probably should have tested the Dominator out before the intercept, but we did it afterwards. I'll talk about that later. An awkward high five over here in a second. And that tornado was just a little bit west of here, east of the town of Grand Island. And I'll show you a video, the raw video from inside that tornado, to show you what it looks like, sounds like in there. And we recorded 138.8 mile per hour wind gusts when our window flew out right there. And the Dominator has outer lexan glass that back then in 2009 we flipped out manually. The back glass got stuck in the down position, so I rolled up the regular glass window, and we thought the tornado was a lot weaker than it was, but a suction vortex, or one of those mini tornadoes that spin around the inside, ramped up the wind speed up to near, actually ES3 levels, above 135 miles per hour, and blew the window out. And that motivated some improvements that I'll talk about later. And our storm chasing goals are threefold. The first one is storm reporting. And all the network of storm chasers out there are basically the eyes in the field of the National Weather Service and local media. So when you see a tornado warning that streams across the bottom of your screen, most of the time that's based on doppler radar, which shows not the rotation of the tornado itself, but the larger scale mesocyclone rotation, which is the whole updraft of the supercell. But those radars can't resolve the tight, strong rotation that the tornado has, and that's why storm chasers in the field are so important, because they'll call in the eyes into the storm. They'll call in reports of tornadoes and large hail, and really help out the warning process. I think there'd be some big problems if we didn't have all the storm chasers out in the field these days. And there are so many of them that a lot of people complain because it'll cause traffic jams, but I've never had a problem with that because the crowd really spins out within about a quarter mile of the tornado. But I think the more storm chasers, the better, because it's very difficult for a tornado to go unseen. And the second part, which has become more important this past year, is disaster response. Because a lot of times storm chasers are the first on the scene and damage. And this year, we were chasing a tornado that was about 2 miles wide. It was massive, it was moving at about 70 miles an hour, and we came up on a town called Yazoo City, Mississippi, and saw all the destructive damage on the east side of town. We dropped everything, got out of our vehicles, went house to house, pulling people out. And every single time I came up to a house, I thought it was going to be the worst case scenario, and I'd see someone that lost their life, and thankfully that didn't happen. The one thing that was interesting about all these homes is that even though they're almost totally wiped out, and many of them, the interior roof and closet was still left standing. That's why you're supposed to get in there when tornado does strike. This is the most sturdy part of the house. That's assuming you can't get underground. So we kept going house to house, and we found one man that was violent entry, and it was completely overwhelming for me. I was an Eagle Scout and CPR courses back then, but I can't save someone that had serious injuries like that. Thankfully, we had our discovery medic with us, and he was able to administer first aid, give them IV, put a neck brace on, and then the other emergency person out came, we carried him out on a stretcher, and our medics called the hospital in Jackson and flew in air support and flew him out, and he was in the hospital for a long time, well over a month, and we went back and saw him. He's in a wheelchair now, but they say he may be able to walk again in a few years, so that is a good story. But it's also motivated us to take first responder training in the off-season, and we realized that Chris's online CPR certification isn't going to cut it in those extreme situations. And the last one that I'll talk about this a lot today is our tornado research. And the whole reason that we built the Dominator is to drive into tornadoes, if not right outside, and measure the wind speeds right at the ground. Because those are the winds that cause the kind of damage that we saw in Yazoo City. And we really don't know how strong those wind speeds could be. Some computer simulations show they could be 400 or 500 miles per hour inside those miniature suction vortices that spin around. And that's what we're trying to do, is measure not only the horizontal winds, but also the intense updraft you get inside tornadoes. And my job is to drive into the tornadoes and take those measurements, and someday down the road, other scientists can take that data and try to better understand tornadoes, or structural engineers can use that to better design homes to withstand both the horizontal and the vertical winds in there. I'm sorry about my voice. I had the flu like 2 weeks ago, but for some reason it's not coming back, so I may just sound like Dick Vitale for the rest of my life. And now I'll show you a quick video from 2007. This was put together by a friend of mine at OU who was in film school at the time, and was also a meteorologist. And this will show one of those tornadoes that has the suction vortices spinning around inside. You can see just how strong they get. And this video motivated our research in trying to measure the wind in those suction vortices. And keep in mind, some of the voiceovers you hear, not the actual storm chasing part, but the voiceovers are a little bit cheesy, but Ken Cole today, he gave me a note card to read them off. So I wouldn't say that in real life. I can't speak for Joel though.
Tornado outbreak ravaged the Great Plains just hours ago. Hundreds are wounded or missing, with locations in Oklahoma reporting total devastation of residential areas.
We live for being within 200 yards of the bottom.
I since retired the cutoff t-shirt too. Government won't let me wear that.
We use our footage in every single way to document it on demand because it's the best.
That's an example of the voiceover. Yeah, I stayed on a suitcase last night for an interview with Joel. It makes me look really short. The last time I ever drove a Joel's vehicle, too. You'll see these suction vortices detected out to the right, ripping around inside the tornado. You can barely see with the naked eye, but I'll show you the frame package later that shows you in action. And keep in mind, everything you see in this talk is probably an example of how not to stay safe around severe weather, which I think would be just as educational. But having that vehicle does make it possible for us to get close to tornadoes like that, if not inside, and still stay safe. I'll show you the concept behind the vehicle in a second. It doesn't handle as well as winter weather, so I'm a little worried about the drive home tomorrow. It's low profile and acts almost like a snowplow when the snow gets high enough. And storm chasing technology has changed dramatically since I started 13 years ago. I grew up in Michigan and moved to Oklahoma in 1998 to study meteorology. And back then I had a 1985 Plymouth Reliant with broken mufflers. You can hear it coming from like 10 miles away. We had paper mats, and every time it would get windy, a cage would blow out the window. And now with a laptop and a data card, you can get high-speed internet to the most remote areas of the Great Plains. And that really helps. Storm chasing, it makes it safer to chase at night. In some cases, it can make it even easier to find the tornadoes. But you can also become too dependent on the data. There was one time in northern Kansas where I was looking at the laptop and the storm was showing a weakening trend. It just produced a tornado and space was shrinking and lifting up. It didn't look very good. And radar confirming this.